Hello, everyone. How are you today? Welcome to a new Logos podcast. Sorry, first of all, uh, because I have been working in a lot of different materials, so I haven't time um, to continue the same pace that I was doing the videos before. So please, my apologies. But yeah, we're trying to start all over again. I have been working in different apologetics and a lot of things that I have been also critical, and also some things that I have found that sometimes we are hypocritical thinking. So yeah, I will start to upload all this material. Just some things maybe I'm going to read just the paper that I just wrote a few days or months ago. And yeah, we are going to start with different topics. In today's topic, before continuing with the Gospels, I think it's good to talk about the resurrection of Jesus. So, like I said before, I've been working in different apologetics. And you know that I come from a background from a Protestant background, but yeah, I have been diving into the early church and the first centuries of history of the Christian church, the maybe this first 5 centuries. And yeah, I have found a lot of interesting things, and it's helping me also to realign all my theology and all the things that I probably been wrong before. And now I have a better understanding of some things using a lot of material from the apostolic era. So yeah, I will be uploading all these different topics, and yeah, I would like to know what you think about that. So today is the resurrection of Jesus. So who is Jesus? The first question that any atheist or Muslim, agnostic, or denialist ask normally is, who is Jesus? Not because some of them don't know about Jesus, the character or the historical Jesus, but because of who they really think he is. And they ask this question because they believe that there is, in some cases, no reliable evidence in the accounts of the Bible. We can say that. Some others claim that there is not enough evidence for a historical Jesus. Actually, when my kids are speaking about Jesus also in other places, like in their school or outside, they speak to other kids, and normally they say that Jesus never existed, or that he is just a fairy tale, or even the Bible is just a bunch of fairy tales. So yeah, there are a lot of different opinions about Jesus, about the Bible, but in the same also in the same case, we have different opinions about his resurrection. And let's be, I think, correct in the way of describing this. As Christians, sometimes we are not really prepared to speak about the resurrection of Jesus without having, just a couple of verses from the Bible. But the reality is that all these people don't believe in the Bible. So there is no point of speaking about something that they don't believe from a source that they don't believe. So normally the Gospels, they don't believe in the Gospels. So Although uh, others, like Muslims, could have an incorrect idea about the person of Jesus, a lot of different people nowadays, they tend to believe that even Jesus never existed. Some Christians will have, like I said before, a really hard time defending their faith in Jesus because of the lack of knowledge and facts about Jesus of Nazareth. So we're going to try to, it's not like rediscover things, it's just using the same things that we know are in historical accounts, and we are going to use the just other accounts trying to not relay in the Bible, okay, just for specific things because we believe is convenient, but we are going to make this case for the resurrection of Jesus. So first question, is there any real evidence that can explain the existence of Jesus, or better yet, his resurrection? And we have to answer some questions. So the first step, I believe, is going to be showing the evidence of the historical Jesus. We need to understand that the historical Jesus and his resurrection can be categorized as either myth or a fact. Yeah. So in order to an event to become a fact, we need at least one of the following cases to be settled, the ones that we have right here. So the first one, can archaeology and history help to defend this case? If we find archaeological evidence, historical evidence, so we can support the case of the resurrection of Jesus. Second, is there any evidence of a historical Jesus from, let's say, other accounts that are not the four Gospels? The number three is there any evidence of his resurrection? So we will begin this apologetics by focusing on examining the sources available to judge the death and resurrection of Jesus from a historical and archaeological point of view, because there is evidence. We just have to find it. So to defend this case, we need to prove whether crucifixion existed and whether it was a form of punishment under Roman occupation in Palestine. There are two ways to judge an event. One will classify any event as historical and the other as a myth. We have said this before. So to qualify an event, as historical, we need at least one of the following criteria to be true. Yeah. So the criteria that we need to fulfill is if there are testimonies, third-party testimonies, either way, direct, indirect, neutral, if there is archaeological evidence, and if there is at least one eyewitness. Okay. If we talk about facts, if we have, let's say, just testimonies, but we don't have archaeological evidence, we can say that it's true, it's a historical event, but since there is no archaeological evidence, so sometimes it's very difficult to support those claims. Also, the same happens with the eyewitnesses. It's better if we have archaeological evidence. So if a fact is qualified as a myth, then we know that it is unfounded. If we say, oh yeah, I heard this, or there are just a couple of evidences, but we don't know, or we're not sure if these are like legit. Yeah. So we end up with unverifiable existence or existence of evidence. And also, in some cases, you will find that legends or other type of events are born in the in just a specific person. It's just an imaginary type of event. So let's start judging the crucifixion. I think this is the first step that we have to do. So what facts do we have about the crucifixion? We know that there are all manuscripts and archaeology evidence or archaeological evidence. Let's talk only about crucifixion right now as a punishment or way of killing someone else, okay? So it was a Roman form of execution. We know that because of historical accounts. We can see some of these accounts in Josephus' writings, the first century Jewish historian. We also have historical accounts about Tacitus. He was a Roman historian also and a politician. And we have a Greek source. He was a satirist. His name is Lucian of Samosata. And in the case of the Jewish writings, we have one called the Talmud. Okay. So we can prove from these sources, all of these, that the crucifixion existed and it was used by the Romans, at least, as a form of execution. Let's see what Josephus has to say about the crucifixion. So this is in the Jewish Wars, chapter 11. He says, so the soldiers, out of the wrath and hatred they bore the Jews, nailed those they hugged, one after one way, and another after another, to the crosses, by way of jest, when their multitude was so great that room was wanting for the crosses, and crosses wanting for the bodies. The next source, Tacitus. This is a fragment from his work, The Annals, book 14, book 14. Soon afterwards, one of his own slaves murdered the city prefect, Pedanius Secundus, either because he had been refused his freedom for which he had made a bargain, or in the jealousy of a love in which he could not brook his master's rivalry. Ancient custom required that the whole slave establishment, which had dwelt under the same roof, should be dragged to execution. So this includes women, children, and men. What else we have of evidence? We have archaeological evidence. So here there's a link to the Guardian article where they are showing this piece of a bone, practically, from a human that is still with the nail. So it says that this is the best physical evidence of Roman crucifixion, and it was found in Cambridgeshire. A near 1900-year-old skeleton discovered with nailed through heel bone during excavation in Fenstanton. So, with the historical account and the archaeology evidence listed above, it is a fact that crucifixion existed and was a form of execution under the Roman Empire. So we have Tacitus, we have other historian, Josephus, and we have also this archaeological evidence. So at least the crucifixion, we can say that is a fact. Yeah, there was or there were people who were being punished by this method, crucifixion. So can we make the same judgment about the death of Jesus? So what data do we have about the existence of Jesus of Nazareth in his crucifixion? Do we have anything? So Christian and atheist scholars affirm that Jesus was crucified. Yes, there are some atheists that they deny that Jesus existed, but we are speaking about atheists who are, they have a PhD in New Testament, for example, the New Testament, and when you hear their conclusion about if Jesus existed, they cannot deny the existence of Jesus, the historical Jesus. Okay, so they can affirm that Jesus was crucified. Actually, one of our previous sources, Josephus, wrote about him. The other source, Tacitus, also wrote about Jesus, and Christians being crucified and tortured using this method also. In the case of Lucian of Samosata, he wrote about Christians in one of his works. Let's remember, he was a satirist, and in the case of the Talmud, gives a brief description of what happened to Yeshu, which is the Aramaic name for Yeshua, or Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, so Josephus, what we have about Jesus and his crucifixion. In the Jewish Antiquities 18.3.3, we will find this fragment of Josephus that says the following: about this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he was one who performed surprising deeds and was a teacher of such people as accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah, and when, upon the accusation of the principal men among us, Pilate had condemned him to a cross, those who had first come to love him did not cease. So here we have Josephus, Jewish historian, speaking about Jesus, and he is describing actually some things that you can find in the Gospels, in the Bible. But the main reason of this video is to show that there is no need to use the Bible to prove that Jesus existed. Let's go to the next source. Tacitus in the Annals again, 15.44. It reads, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. So it seems that Tacitus is also confirming some of the things that we can read in the Gospels about Jesus. Is this proving that the Gospel is reliable? You can judge that. We will continue and we will try to not rely on the Bible so much. So we are going to use, like I said before, sources outside the Bible. Just a few we're going to use from the Bible, but those that are accepted by even atheist scholars. Okay. Next one, Lucian of Samosata. In the Passing Peregrinus, it says, it was then that he learned the wondrous lore of the Christians by associating with their priests and scribes in Palestine. And how else could it be? In a trice he made them all look like children, for he was prophet, cult leader, head of the synagogue, and everything all by himself. He interpreted and explained some of their books and even composed many, and they revere him as a god, made use of him as a lawgiver, and set him down as a protector. Next after that other, to be sure, whom they still worship, the man who was crucified in Palestine because he introduced this new cult into the world. So I think it's very clear who is he referring to. Talmud. This is in the Sanhedrin 43a. Jesus the Nazarene is going out to be stoned because he practiced sorcery, incited people to idol worship, and led the Jewish people astray. Anyone who knows of a reason to acquit him should come forward and teach it on his behalf, or speak in his behalf. And the court did not find a reason to acquit him, and so hung him on Passover Eve. So again, we have the Talmud speaking about Jesus. not in the way that is described in the Gospels, because we have to remember that for the Jewish authorities, Jesus was someone who was, like the text is describing here, leading people astray, because he was claiming to be God incarnated. He was claiming to be the Son of Man or the Son of God, who are titles for the Messiah and for God himself. Yeah. So there are a lot of other sources, but I think these are the most used and accepted by scholars, okay, even those who are atheists. So one thing before we move to the next slide that I would like to express here is that they say that they hung him on Passover Eve. The gospel says that actually it wasn't the Passover, yeah, Eve, when he dies, right, just a few hours before the Shabbat. And the word hung in Hebrew literature also refers to crucifixion, okay? So someone who is hanged in a tree, or in other way, it could be referring to crucifixion also. So with all the accounts that we have right now about Jesus, we can say that he really existed and that he died actually by crucifixion. We can conclude that we have enough evidence about him historically without needing to use the Gospels, at least until now. So he is described as a miracle worker, according to Josephus and the Talmud, and was killed by this way of execution, crucifixion. But what about his resurrection? I mean, right now we have been talking about the same thing that a lot of people are normally referring, yeah? So there is a lot of people who actually they say that they can believe that he actually died, but what we cannot prove is his resurrection. So can we make the same case to prove that Jesus really was resurrected? And this is the main reason of the preaching of the gospel. There is no gospel, no kingdom of heaven, no Christianity, if Jesus was not resurrected. So how can we prove? So in the case of the resurrection of Jesus, we have 500 people at least. These were disciples practically. They were eyewitnesses. And the disciples believed to have seen a resurrected Jesus. There is also a high consensus among scholars, including those who are atheists, that after Jesus' crucifixion, his disciples affirmed that Jesus appeared to them, and this is the message they preached. After this event, they risked their lives and died as martyrs, preaching the gospel of a resurrected Jesus. So, some historians they were claiming that actually the disciples of Jesus uh, saw him. Of course, we're not using the Bible to do that. We're going to show this evidence, historical evidence, without using the Bible yet, okay? So, the disciples claimed that Jesus appeared to them, and scholarly talking, we can trace those claims back to the very years after Jesus was crucified. So there are many sources. Of course, the main source is going to be the New Testament, but not the Gospels. Not because the Gospels are not true in the historical account about Jesus, his life, death, and resurrection, but because for this purpose we said that we are not going to use the Gospels. So these 500 people, yes, they are in the Bible, but not in the Gospels. So first we're going to speak about a special enemy. He had an experience with the resurrected Jesus. His name was Saul of Tarsus. He was a Pharisee. He was a high-level scholar of Judaism. He started to persecute Christians for believing in Jesus. We can say that he was considered a skeptic and, in fact, believed that God was calling him to torture, to kill Christians. So he was making a favor to God. He was the one who gave the order to kill Stephen, who is the first Christian martyr. The same person we're talking about between 2 or 3 years after Jesus' death, this same person called Saul of Tarsus, he wrote that he was on his way to Damascus when he had his own experience with the resurrected Jesus. As a result of his experience, he became practically blind because God struck him with blindness. Now, Saul is an independent source. He is a very reliable source due to his title of a scholar of Judaism. So this is why we're using this part of the New Testament, because in the case of Paul, he was a scholar. So even atheists who are scholars in the New Testament, they accept Paul, even his letters to the churches, as reliable evidence of the historical Jesus. Although they don't believe in the resurrection, they say that they accept the letters of Saul or Paul. So we know that he changed his name to Paul, and after regaining his sight, he began to preach the resurrected Jesus. So what happens here? This was ending his days as a persecutor of Christians, and he became one of them. He also wrote in his letters that he met and had at least 2 meetings with some of Jesus' disciples, Peter, John, and James, Jesus' brother or cousin, however you want to describe it. Let's remember that the word adelphos in Greek not necessarily means brother from, the same marriage. It can be also referring to a stepbrother, half brother, or in other case, any other relative. So that's why when we refer to the brother of Jesus, we are talking about not brother like being son of Mary, but actually is a son from another Mary. Okay, so it's like a cousin, or in the most close case, if he wasn't cousin, so it will be someone who is not the son of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Okay, so the first meeting, it says that it took place approximately 5 years after Jesus' death. So this is very, very soon after Jesus' resurrection, practically death and resurrection. So we have, besides Paul, we also have other eyewitness. The testimony of a skeptical brother or relative. Let's remember adelphos, of Jesus of Nazareth. So those who are described in the Bible as the brother of Jesus, we are talking about James, Joseph, Judas, Simon, and other sisters. These words that are used here for brothers and sisters, like I said before, are very generic. So it doesn't mean that these are sons of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Okay. But what we can be sure is that they did not believe in Jesus before his death. So one of these is James. Paul wrote to the Corinthians that James believed in Jesus after his death. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 3 to 7, you will see this specific sentence where he describes that then he, Jesus, appeared to James. So one of these relatives of Jesus. The book of Acts and the letters of Paul to the Galatians, letter because it's one, to the Galatians, have a reference to James as the leader of the church in Jerusalem. Also, if we talk about the same sources that we have been using to prove not only the crucifixion, but also that the historical Jesus is not a myth, it's a fact that he was a man who was walking this earth 2000 years ago. We can speak about historian Josephus, the historian Josephus, who wrote that the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, whose name was James, died martyr. It's also said that he died preaching the resurrected Jesus. His martyrdom is found in Josephus, Eusebius, Clement of Alexandria, and Eusebius. All of these are historical accounts that are not described in the Bible. Also, we have in 2002 archaeological discovery of an ossuary of the 1st century that had an inscription, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. So let's go and check this. This is a really strong and possible evidence that this is practically the burial box of James, the relative of Jesus. So this was also published in The Guardian, and it says that an ancient burial box claimed to have earliest reference to Jesus. Limestone burial box is typical of 1st century Jerusalem and has a chiseled, I don't remember how to pronounce correctly this, on side, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. So there is in one of the sides, this is what you can read in Greek: James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Adelphos again. Okay, don't confuse the brother word because it's very generic, like I said before. So it's evidence that relative of Jesus, who was son of Joseph, so in that case it supports this theory that these sons of Joseph were actually the ones that were described in the Gospels. Okay, maybe some of them, not all of them, or probably all of them, we don't know. We're not sure about that. Like I said before, Adelphos is very generic, so we don't know in this case if this is true. So this means that Joseph had at least James, maybe the rest of the names that we saw in the Gospels, and they are not actually sons of Mary or daughters of Mary. All right, so what else? This is a very, let's say, very new, and not discovery, but the news are actually, really, really recent. But the discovery, it seems like it has some years that this was discovered. So the earliest inscription, which is called the Megiddo mosaic, it says that Jesus is God. It was discovered in Israel, and this is one of the greatest findings since the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can see this note in gbnews.com, and it's actually all of this that it's we're talking about mosaic that was discovered beneath the floor of a prison in Israel. It is said the engraving is 1,800 years old. So yeah, in that time you can see that this inscription says Jesus is God. So it's not something new that the church or an invention of the Catholic Church that Jesus is God. This is very, very old, and is evidence that the first Christians, they knew that Jesus is God. What else do we have as an evidence of Jesus' resurrection? The empty tomb. This is the last and main fact of Jesus' resurrection, and close to 75% of scholars, maybe between 70 and 75%, including atheists, agree that the empty tomb is an historical fact. For this reason was written that after 50 days of the crucifixion of Jesus, the disciples started to preach everywhere the risen Jesus, and almost all of them suffered martyrdom. Yeah. So we're not referring to the apostles alone, but also the apostles of the apostles. So all these priests and all these deacons, all the structure that they started as the church, they were also preaching. We see also in historic accounts that there was already apostolic succession. Yes, there is historical facts about that. So we are talking about the apostles and all the other ones who came after them, that they were preaching a resurrected Jesus, and they were suffering martyrdom because of that. So the empty tomb is another evidence that Jesus was resurrected. So let's go to Josephus in the Jewish Antiquities 18.3.3 says that those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold. This and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him and the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. So, yeah, we know that he was not Christian, at least when he wrote this. And practically you are hearing almost the same thing that you hear and that you read in the Gospels. Yeah. And it's not the Gospel, it's the Jewish Antiquities. A historian writing. Also, in 20.9200 of the Jewish Antiquities, we have Josephus saying the following: Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but upon the road. So he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus. So again, we have this relative of Jesus, who was called Christ. So we are speaking about the same Jesus, the Christ of Nazareth, whose name was James. So we are speaking now about the relative, James, the one who was bishop in Jerusalem, and some others, or some of his companions. And when he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law, he delivered them to be stoned. So, execution of the followers of Christ, including a relative, James. So, the best historical sources about the resurrection, we can find it in the Apostles, Paul's letters. I think is going to be the first one, like I said before, because it's accepted among scholars as a good evidence. Also, we have the oral tradition. We have the creeds in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-7, that this is dated between 30 and 33 AD. The sermons that we see in the book of Acts, chapter 2. Also, the oral tradition that we can find in the Catholic Church. The written tradition, we're speaking about the Gospels, the fathers of the Apostolic Church also that are part of the early church. We are speaking about Clement of Rome, Clement of Alexandria, Polycarp, Irenaeus, Ignatius of Antioch, a lot of them, so you can search for Apostolic Church Fathers and you will have a whole list about them. Best historical sources about martyrdom of those who were teaching that Jesus was resurrected. We have the book of Acts, again, Clement of Rome. He knew Peter, and actually he was, according to tradition, he was made the bishop of Rome by Peter himself. This was after Linus, of course. Polycarp, who was martyr in Smyrna and disciple of the Apostle John. Ignatius of Antioch, also disciple of the Apostle John. Dionysius of Corinth, this is only in Eusebius' account. We don't have any more writings about Dionysius of Corinth. Irenaeus of Lyon, Tertullian, Origen, among others. Okay. So, thank you again. And I think I'm going to make my conclusion from here. And everything that we have seen until now is considered solid evidence, at least to this day, and corroborates the existence of a Jesus in a historical way, and how his resurrection can be verified even by historical writings outside the Christian Bible and archaeological evidence also. So we have other type of evidence that points to the resurrection of Jesus, that this is according to my opinion. I can add, and I would like to add, the Shroud of Turin. I think there has been a lot of tests that this shroud has been going through, and everything is pointing that there is a huge probability to be the shroud that Jesus used. There are some things that are very unexplainable about this shroud, and yeah, I think I can use this shroud of Turin to make other point about or in favor of the resurrection of Jesus. You can investigate about this shroud. It is said that in the testing, it came out that the image that is printed practically there in the shroud, it was like a negative type of when we're talking about cameras, the negatives, the old cameras, when you had to go to a dark room and make all the process to reveal the actual photography. So the negatives in this shroud, it seems to be similar to those negatives of the photographs, where you can find specific things about how this person died, which wounds he had, and also there is one of the studies that says that it seems this there was like a, not like an explosion, but something similar to that happened in a specific time, and this was what produced this negative printing in the shroud, and it seems to be like a special energy, like what is the name of this thing? I forgot. There is like a type of nuclear type of energy, radioactive type of energy that produced this imprinting of the body and face and everything in the shroud, and it shows the teeth first, the teeth of the person who is in this shroud, and then the lips. So it says that this could happen from inside to the outside. Yeah. So it's like a radioactive type of thing that happened there. So that can be a proof for the resurrection also. The shroud. You can search about that. There is a lot of evidence. And other one that I think also I consider as good evidence is something that maybe you're not expecting. And this is the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary, especially those of Fatima in Portugal, Zaitun in Cairo, and the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico. Why? These are a strong argument, I believe, for the resurrection of Jesus, and I will explain why. If we take as a base the event of the transfiguration with Jesus before his passion, was speaking with Moses and Elijah in front of Peter, John, and James. So if God allows things like that, and in the Old Testament we see also that God allowed Samuel to appear after being dead, to appear to Saul when he was with this witch, so God allowed Samuel indeed, to speak to Saul while he was dead, and also using the same thing that Jesus said, that God is not a God of the dead but the living. We can say that the Marian apparitions could be also evidence of the resurrection of Jesus. Uh, if we speak about this event of Elijah and Moses in front of Peter, John, James, talking with Jesus, this event happened after God the Father had revealed the divinity of his Son through Peter. So, who else is revealing practically in these apparitions the divinity of the Son? The Virgin Mary. And I consider that this type of events, where important figures appear to a specific group of people, can happen again not only to the believers in Jesus among the Jewish people, like Peter, John, and James, but also to non-believers and those Christians among the Gentiles to whom the Blessed Virgin Mary is better known as the cause of salvation. And you don't believe that what I'm saying right now, so you can see it because it's described in this way by the church fathers. For example, Irenaeus, when he said Mary was the new Eve, being obedient, she became the cause of salvation for herself and for the whole human race. So therefore, I am sure that the apparitions of this kind must point to Jesus as the first fruit of the resurrection, since without the resurrection of Jesus, there will be no Marian apparitions. Therefore, the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary may be considered as evidence of the resurrection of her Son, because in the same way as Moses and Elijah were important figures for Judaism, how much more will be for Christians the Mother of our God and Savior. Thank you very much. See you soon.